All right. Let's see. What happened to? Here we go. Okay. All right. Figurative language or figures of speech. Right. That's a key poetic device, and we studied these different categories of figurative language. We had comparison, simile, metaphor, hypocatastasis. Those are all different levels of comparison that are used. Simile being the least direct, the weakest. Metaphor is a stronger comparison, and the strongest is hypocatastasis, uh, where it's a direct declaration about something. It's compared so strongly that it is called that thing. So instead of saying he is like a dog or he is a dog, then say dog. Attributing features, right? That's where basically one a human characteristic is attributed to a non-human object. That's personification. And then, of course, if it's attributed or described of God, the hand of God, the face of God, that's an anthropomorphism. And then an animal characteristic describing God would be a zoomorphism. Again, those would be figurative because God does not have those features. Now, God the Son, of course, the incarnate Christ had human characteristics. But so when we're speaking of Jesus, it would be, when it talks about the hand of Christ or the face of Jesus, I mean, when he was on earth, that would be literal. But otherwise speaking, they would be figurative, particularly in poetry. Substitution is another category. We have the different types of metonymy where one thing represents another. Synecdoche is the part of something that represents the whole. So if you speak of, the soul of a man would represent, his whole person. So euphemism, the word or phrase used in place of one that would be more direct or perhaps offensive. And then idioms. Idioms very common. It's an expression normally that the meaning is the literal definition of each word in the expression does not mean what the expression means. Many examples of that we'll see. Hyperbole, exaggeration, irony, we just talked about actually a moment ago, where the author intends to mean something different or opposite to what he says. Wordplay, and then merism. Merism is the totality of something communicated through two usually opposite word, heaven and earth, day and night, forever and ever, east, from the east to the west. Those would be examples, merism. Okay, so last time we met, we went through a few examples together. So I just wanted to pick that up here. The best way to learn these is just to look at examples together. So I'm going to follow that same format that we did last time, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. And hopefully, if you guys, I'll just call on you guys, but if you can't do it or whatever, just let me know. We already did the psalm together. I'll just do the first couple just by way of reminder. If you remember, he will be like a tree.
Simile.
It's a simile. Notice the word like. So it's a comparison of the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. The righteous man will be like a tree. All right. Firmly planted. And then notice day and night. That's a merism. Meditates on his law day and night. Well, it's not literal. He's not doing it every second of every hour of every day, but it's just an expression indicating his commitment to do it consistently and frequently. So a use of a merism draws that out. Another example we did together was example of personification. Let the rivers clap their hands. Well, rivers don't have hands that clap, obviously. The mountains sing. Well, mountains don't have the ability to sing. So these are figurative expressions which are describing, just to emphasize, focus on the tone of celebration and praise to God. Now, as I mentioned, the process of determining whether it is a figure of speech or not. Here's one more we did together, I think. My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. That's a merism, emphasizing all things. And really here, it is literal in this sense, because he did actually make heaven and earth. But also, too, is just a merism in the sense of emphasizing the totality of his creation. Now, when we approach, oh, sorry, one more we did. Do you guys remember this one? He will cover you with his pinions, his feathers.
Yep.
Under his wings, you may seek refuge. Remember what we called that? Yep.
Zoomorphism.
Zoomorphism, yeah.
Zoomorphism,
Animal
yeah.
features attributed to God or expressing God. And then we had his faithfulness is a shield. That was a metaphor. The faithfulness is not a physical object, so it can't be, but here it's described as a shield because it is making a comparison. And a bulwark, that was a second metaphor here. So when we approach trying to determine or identify figures of speech, we first have to ask, okay, is this line meant literally? He will cover you with his pinions. And then we would say, well, pinions or feathers are not, God doesn't have that. So this is figurative. And what kind of figure of speech? And then I guess that's where we'd say, the zoomorphism. So you just kind of go through and look at each line and then ask the question, does this appear to be literal? And so if it is, then the literal definitions would make sense. But again, if we say that, well, feathers, if that's literal, then we're saying God has feathers. And that would contradict the fact that he is spirit, not physical. Okay.
Pastor Tim, may I ask to go back to that? What is the potential error in the exegesis if we don't, or if we fail to see that the phrase here in Psalm 91 verse 4 is in fact a zoomorphism? In other words, if someone who is interpreting the Bible did not see that it is a zoomorphism, what kind of error it may bring about in his exegesis?
Well, what would that, if he says literally God has wings and feathers,
which is not,
what would that what could that introduce then in a person's thinking? I mean, what happened in ancient times? They believed their gods had animal features, right? So they made idols and statues. And if you remember, in the 10 words, the 10 commandments, what did God say right at the beginning of those? Right. You shall not make an idol. And he meant of himself. Right. And of course, what is it that the Israelites did not long after that?
They make the golden calf.
Yeah.
The golden calf.
So they wanted to reduce God to a created object. And of course, a bad exegesis of his text would lend itself to people potentially having that thought that God is, a created object or has those characteristics. I think, in this passage, I don't think anybody in modern times in our circles would be swayed by that. But there are many other texts, as we talked about before. I think going back to one that Dwayne brought up, a couple sessions ago in John 6, right? Eat my flesh, drink my blood. So a literal interpretation of that would be highly, has been brought about a lot of error in the church. So yeah, it's always a good question to consider, and in both directions. You know, if I interpret something that is figurative and I say it's literal, it can have a significant effect on our doctrine. If I say something that is literal and interpret it as figurative, it can do the same thing, right? Where God meant something literally, but it's taken figuratively. We see that a lot in how prophecies are interpreted. That, oh, this is not literally Israel. This is represents the church.
Yeah.
All right. So, or this is not a literal 1,000 years. It's figurative.
Or the 144,000 in the Revelation.
Could be literal. I tend to think, yeah, that is literal, but it's sometimes interpreted as a figurative thing or symbolic. A lot of the things in Revelation are, again, whenever prophecy is described, I see a lot of actually literal events being claimed to be figurative. But what's interesting, you know, I was just teaching Daniel 9 to our class in Pakistan. And, you know, Daniel 9, of course, the 70 weeks, the 77s is the famous passage there. But before those verses, it's Daniel's prayer for his nation, because it says Daniel realized they were coming out of, in fact, I could show you this. Daniel 9.
Verse 3, I guess.
Right. First year of Darius. I, Daniel, discerned in the books the number of years concerning which the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet for the fulfillment of laying waste of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. And then he basically, you know, he realizes that the 70 years are
literal.
Have happened. The 70-year exile that Jeremiah predicted in two different places, right? I think there's probably a cross reference here. Nope. Maybe here. Nope.
Yeah, 25:11.
Oops. What happened there? Sorry, guys. There we go. Right? God promised, right? He would take the people. This whole land of Jerusalem will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And then he again repeats it in Jeremiah 29. When the 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit and fulfill my good word to bring you back. Well, Daniel was aware of these prophecies. Remember, they were contemporaries. Daniel and Jeremiah overlapped. They lived at the same time. And so he was aware, right? I observed in the books the number of years. So he had access to Jeremiah's prophecy. And notice Daniel interpreted it literally.
Yep.
Right? He said, "It's okay, Lord, it's been 70 years. We've deserved your judgment. You know, forgive our sins." And then basically presents a prayer asking God to fulfill this promise to restore his people. But guys always overlook this. You know, he interpreted prophecy literally. Why is it that we have trouble doing that at times? Now, there are obviously there are prophecies, there are symbols, and there are figurative language. You know, Daniel 7, the four beasts, those were symbols. They weren't real. But the text will guide us to that. We'll talk about that when we get to prophecy someday. But I often see the literal, what is intended to be literal is interpreted as figurative, and so then that really changes the meaning of the passage. So you have to watch out in both directions.
Yep.
And this is why one of the reasons we're doing this is just to get used to see what kinds of figures of speech are typically used. And then of course the context is always going to be king, and you will have indication often in the context whether something's literal or figurative. If we're dealing with poetry, poetic passages, that's where we will see a lot of the figurative language. And that's why even too, prophecies, often the messages were in poetic form. So poetic devices are often used in prophetic texts. So that's what makes them more challenging to interpret as well. Welcome, Dwayne. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Man, we was praying that you'd survive. You was in Pakistan, right?
Yeah. I was showing the guys a few pictures before you came, but we had a great trip. Thanks for your prayers.
Well, you need the Lord's blessing there, otherwise
Oh yeah,
it could get complicated, but we need the Lord's blessing here in Malaysia too, and wherever you are. It's about the same all over. It's a little complicated these days.
yes. Well, that's what we tell people, say, well, even the other day, someone said, you go to Pakistan and you came back alive? Why would you go there? And it's dangerous. And so, well, that's true, but honestly, there have been mass shootings in America. You could end up getting killed here, a rock concert.
Yeah.
So our days are numbered. We don't want to be reckless, of course. I always try to walk in the Lord's will, but we're all in his hands at every moment. He sustains us. But yeah, we had a great trip. It was really a blessing. Tina was able to come with me, so it was really nice to have her there, and she ministered.
Oh, that's why you were safe. Then it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have Cincy along, I'd be totally safe, no problem.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good. A good time. Okay, let's go through some. Let me give you guys opportunity here. Go through some examples. Tongin, let's start with you. Can you read this psalm or this verse from the psalm, and then just see if you can identify any figures of speech here?
Psalm 6, number 6. I am weary with my shine. Every night I make my bed swim. I flood my couch with my tears. This is
So again,
I make my sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, take it one line at a time. I am weary with my sighing. Is that literal, most likely, or figurative?
I think it is figurative. Oh, no. This is weary with my. I think it's literal.
Yeah, I think it'd be literal, right? Just I'm tired from my. So then every night I make my bed swim.
That is not literal. That is figurative.
What figures of speech do you see here?
This is Molinism. It's no. This is not the word mol. Morphism.
Oh, let me yeah, let me sorry, I'll pull up the figures of speech so you can see those next to. All right, where is it? That's not it.
This is figurative.
Oh, where's? Okay, sorry. Give me a second. I'll pull
Oh, I
these.
think that is like a merism.
Okay,
Is it merism?
which part?
Every night I make my best swim.
Okay, every night.
Yeah, every night I make my best swim.
Okay, every night could be maybe could be hyperbole, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It could be
Yeah.
literal. He could be crying every night, but potential hyperbole, I would just put maybe question mark, right? Every night.
Okay.
But then, yeah, you were talking earlier. So make my bed swim. Do beds swim? Are they like, boats? Or
Mm-hmm.
what would that be?
That is figurative. Yeah, figurative.
Yeah, notice here, he's comparing his bed to something, isn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's a
swim.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think that is?
Uh, personification. No.
Okay, personification.
Yeah.
Yeah, because beds don't swim. But notice though, the idea of the bed floating. It could also be just the metaphor. A bed's being compared to a boat.
Yeah.
Because swim can mean a person that's actually swimming or just something that's in the water.
Yeah.
So it could be either one of those. I flood my couch with my tears.
So I think it's also hyperbole.
Hyperbole. Yes. What's hyperbole here? What part?
I flood.
Yes. Right.
Flood my yeah.
So flood with tears. That's be hard to do to cry that much.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Pastor Tim, I
Yeah.
just want to kind of for myself to kind of how do I say to get a handle right on this. In terms of what could be the potential error if someone who is going to teach or even preach on Psalm 6, and then he didn't realize or didn't see that the word every night is actually a hyperbole and then the personification and so on. And then the guy went on to either say to himself or to the church that you must come to God with that kind of severity of your heart, that you must cry to the Lord every night. Otherwise, the Lord will not hear you. Would that be kind of the error that if we fail to see the figurative features in this verse?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, we saw in the Psalm 1, right? Meditate in his law day and night. And so some have taken things like that literally. And so they don't eat, they would put on people kind of a legalistic expectation that, you should be every moment of every day reading the Bible. So yeah, the application could end up they could have an erroneous application or something like that. Like you said, God will only hear you if you are crying every night.
Yeah.
something like that. And that wouldn't be, you know, a serious error, right? Wouldn't be bad if people were earnest in their prayer to the point they would be in tears on a regular basis, but that's not a requirement. I think where we get in trouble is when we make, you know, mandates on everything. When here, I think it's David. You know, he's not mandating that this be done. Yeah, it's David in a time of trial. He's just describing what he was feeling, what he was experiencing. So we always have to be careful. It's like we talked about narratives, right? Prescriptive versus descriptive. And so here he's just describing his condition. But and it's really, I think the thing that we miss, if you know, if you're looking at things more literally or whatever, you miss the poetic eloquence and emotional impact that this is intended to express. That's the important thing here. He could have just said, "I'm weary with my sighing," right? That's the meaning here. But then he adds these expressions of, I'm crying so much, I'm flooding my couch with tears so much that my couch is floating away. Well, that obviously he's exaggerating here, but it's making the point that he was suffering great anguish. And so if we miss the figurative language here, we will miss the intent from David to express just how deep was his pain and sorrow in this case. So that's the other side of it, that a wrong understanding or lack of recognition of the figurative language can take away from the author's intended, how he intends his words to impact the reader. So that's important to keep in mind. You try, let me give you the next one here. Psalm 8.
When I consider your heaven, the work of your fingers, obviously God doesn't have a finger.
So what would that be?
That will be, this minute. That will be anthropomorphism.
Yes, anthropomorphism. Good. All right.
And then the moon, the stars, that can be literal, which you have ordained. Now, I'm not sure about ordained, whether it's God or see what's the other translation.
Yeah, I mean, you might have to do word study, but ordained, right? Just the English ideas, what he established, what he determined, what he carried out, what he planned.
What I just said, the NIV says, the moon and the star which you have set in place. So that looks like literal.
Yeah.
But if you look at the word ordained as in ordination of a priest or minister, then it could be some sort of figurative.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd have to. But, again, with parallelism, the work of your fingers, which you have ordained. So he's talking about creation, what he created. So just knowing parallelism, we could understand even in the context what ordained means here. Moon and stars, yes, he did literally create them, but I would also say that's a merism in the sense that it's describing, right, the night sky. So it's an expression for the totality of the night sky. Now it's not figurative, but it is a figure of speech that is used here. Also, two fingers. Now this may not have. It is an anthropomorphism, but also as well, normally, if you look in scripture, when the act of creation often, or when God is creating or expressing his power, it talks about the hand or the arm of God. This is a unique expression to talk about his fingers.
It's like the writing on the wall.
Yeah, it was his hand
Yeah, it was.
or a
That
hand, not literal his.
was,
But yeah, here I think this is almost like a synecdoche, that the fingers represent the hand or the arm. And that you'd only know by understanding just kind of how typically when we talk about God's creative power, usually or act, it talks about the hand of God moving. I don't know if there's another place that speaks of his finger.
Was it not the Nebuchadnezzar, the writing on the wall?
That was his grandson, Belshazzar.
Oh, Belshazzar. Yeah.
So here even I think, why does this matter? Who cares? What's the big deal? What? Well, because I think what's being emphasized here by David is that, not just, you think of God actually, the work of his fingers. So it's almost this idea, there's a detail that David, I think, is drawing out here. Because if he had just said the work of your hands, right? That's a common expression in the Old Testament. Then we say, oh yeah, just God's creative work. But here he says finger. So he identifies even just a small part of God's hand. Again, figurative sense. So I think David is doing something more here than just talking about God's creative act, but even the power, he's able to do it just with his finger. And even two fingers have the idea of, they're more detailed, more, like painters use their fingers, right? And so it's a good thing to think about. Why did he use this expression? Why didn't he say the work of his hands? Because that gives a more idea in Hebrew mind of creative, creating something like a potter, the work of his hands. But here he just says fingers. So there's a distinction there you would want to understand. Why is he doing that? And you would see that by just looking that up in the Old Testament. You won't see this expression, the finger of God. I don't think. There may be one other place. I have to go back, but it's not as common as the work of his hands is a common expression. All right. Okay. Daniel, let me give you the next one here. Psalm 22:16. If you could read that and
then. For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers has compassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Let me see now. For dogs have surrounded me. Would
so
you
is he
play a
talking
simile?
about? Is he talking about literal? Is this literal?
No, it's not literal. That's probably talking about people who are fierce people and things like that. Yeah. So would it be hyperbole?
Okay. Just the idea of being surrounded.
Yeah.
It could be hyperbole. Like they're all over me, all around me.
Yeah, hyperbole.
Surrounded, encompassed.
And then a band of evildoers has encompassed me. I think this is literal, probably, because as you face your enemy, that's what their intent is. So probably this is literal.
Okay, yeah, band of evildoers. Notice, okay, understanding parallelism, we have a band of evildoers. Dogs have surrounded, has encompassed, and then of course me. All right, so we see the
Then-
parallelism. So dogs are, there's a band of evildoers being compared to dogs here, right?
Yeah.
So he's not saying literal dogs have surrounded me. He's saying these evil men have surrounded me,
Men.
right?
Yeah, they are like dogs, or maybe so. It could be again. It could be zoomorphism. Yeah, also. For
Well,
dogs,
normally
they're
zoomorphism is when God is given
Oh,
animal characteristics. Here, remember, it's a
okay,
comparison being made here, right? Band of
Okay,
evildoers are being
comparison.
compared to
Alright.
dogs. So remember
Mm,
what kind
yeah.
of comparison?
Um, hypocatastasis, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that fancy one,
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
right? He didn't say catastasis. He didn't say men who are like dogs. He
Yeah,
just
yeah,
said
yeah.
dogs.
Dogs, yes, that's hypocatastasis.
So it's the
yeah.
most direct, strongest comparison.
Very right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the third line, they pierce my hands and my feet. Merism, my hands and my feet.
Yeah, hands and feet.
Yeah, they pierced. May not be literal, but just talks of act of violence or intent to or inflicting pain and injury. So
Yeah,
let
so
me
that
see
would
now.
be
If you that would be could it be euphemism? No,
I think you're close. Substitution. I think would see this as
I think
an idiom.
yeah, it could be an idiom, an expression. Yeah, it's an idiom. I think that pierce my hands and my feet.
Now, what's interesting about this, obviously, Psalm 22 is messianic, so
Yes, yes.
it
Yeah.
actually is literal in its fulfillment. But
From a crucifixion, yeah.
at the time writing, it would be hard to see that necessarily here.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
now knowing this is prophetic, then it does turn out
could
to
be
actually be a literal
yeah,
statement.
Literal thing. Yeah. I mean, if you understand it as prophetic, then it's a literal statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Dwayne, you want to tackle the next one here? Proverbs 9:1.
Proverbs 9:1, wisdom has built her house. Well, obviously, wisdom don't build houses. She has hewed out her 7 pillars. Well, I think we understand what it's saying, but wisdom, of course, is being personified here.
Yes.
As someone that builds houses and hews out pillars.
Mm.
But what is that? I don't know. Is that hyperbole? No, I guess not.
No, personification. You're correct. I think wisdom is built. Well, wisdom is not a person. It's a attribute. So, and then she has hewn. Yeah, those are personifications.
Makes her female yet.
Yes.
Interesting.
Which I always point out to the guys that, try to personify wisdom as, or compare wisdom as Christ. That's but in Proverbs 9, wisdom is feminine. So, but yeah, it's personification. And then one other thing, her 7 pillars. That's kind of an interesting expression.
Yeah.
That she only makes 7 pillars for her house.
Well, 7 is always a complete number, so it's no doubt that we got the right number of pillars here.
Yes, it could be literal. Could be literally.
Well, I think it's an idea. I mean, the whole thing is an idea of building some kind of structure or idea or principle or entity The houses can be translated a number of ways,
Yeah.
depending on the context, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's what I just pulled up the passage here. You know, she's hewn out her 7 pillars, prepared her food, mixed her wine. So it almost seems like maybe because the detail here, she's done all of these things, might just indicate, you know, the statement she's hewn out her 7 pillars is the idea of the house that her life is fully built, complete. Given what comes after, but that would only be, you know, knowing that the number 7, you know, is often used, not always, but is often used as to sort of express an idea of completion. Another example of this is in Revelation 5. The 7 spirits of God, right?
Mm.
I think even in Zechariah 4, is it? Thought there was a statement, the 7 eyes.
Yeah. Zechariah 4.
These 7,
Yeah.
these 7 are the eyes of the Lord, which range to and fro. So does God have 7 eyes? Well, that's one, an anthropomorphism. But then secondly, we have to ask, is that 7, you know, literal? Or is it just an expression of the idea of completeness that God's, you know, the 7 eyes, God sees everything. So, which is how I would lean on this one.
Mm.
So, but again, 7's not always figurative. In fact, even in Zechariah 4, when he is told to build a lampstand, or when he observes the lampstand in the temple, right, the lampstand, where is it? Sorry, guys, here it is. Okay. So I see the lampstand on it, 7 lamps with 7 spouts belonging to each of the lamps. Well, that's actually literal because the menorah had 7 spouts, 7 branches. So actually here, the 7 lamps and 7 spouts here are literal. The 2 olive trees, that number is literal. So you have to be careful then. So 7, even in this passage, is not always figurative. Can also be literal. So you only can know that by understanding what's being described here. And knowing this is the lampstand that is in the temple, we know it has 7 branches, 7 spouts, the lamps on it.
Yeah.
We can you can see here things can get rather complicated as you're trying to figure this out, you know. And so really having an understanding of not only the context, but even the broader knowledge of the Old Testament in this case, to know kind of how expressions are used. Because we talked, like I said earlier, the work of his fingers.
Mm.
Well, if you were, you know, a good student of the Old Testament, you know that that's an unusual expression. Normally it's the work of your hands. And so this is where having a good understanding of the rest of the Old Testament is going to be needed in order to help in the interpretation.
Yeah.
The broader
Pastor T,
context. Yes.
now, I was having some difficulty on this Proverbs 9 verse 1, the 7 pillars. The semester that I joined in Manila, in fact, my assignment was to the exegesis of Proverbs 9. And so when I came across this phrase 7 pillars, the first question came to my mind, whether if this is literal, So I was browsing up and down the entire Proverbs 9, hoping to look for 7 pillars that the Lady Wisdom is speaking here. But I can only find in Proverbs 9 the most 4 to 5, maybe 6 principles of wisdom, such as in verse 6, live your simple ways and you will walk in understanding, right? That could be one of the principle. And then the next one in verse 7, correcting a mocker and rebuking a wicked man and so on. But I couldn't find 7. So I am just asking for help whether have I got it right. Then I thought that maybe the 7 is figurative rather than literal, because I can't find 7 principle of wisdoms in Proverbs 9, so-called. And then what sort of complicated my thinking was, how we always talk about 7 habits of highly effective people by Stephen Covey. All this, kind of a package of 7.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if we had a list of something right after this, of 7 things, you would have evidence in the context that the 7 was literal. But again, I think right after that, it just describes how she fills the house, and prepares everything else. I think it's just a figure of expression. It's her house is complete. She's built her house. Because 7 pillars is again an odd number for a house. 4 would make sense for each of the 4, or an even number. 6 maybe if she put 1 in the middle of 2 of the walls. But but this is the process, right? You kind of look in the context, see is anything in the context guide us. And then you have to consider, okay, this expression, is this used elsewhere in the Bible? And so this, again, there's a common knowledge about this number 7 often being used as a number of completeness. But like 7 days of creation, it's a literal 7. So we have to be careful that we don't presume one way or the other. But, we look for clues in the context, or we look for, is this expression used commonly or not? Or like we looked in the example, the 7 spirits of God. Does God have 7 spirits? No, there's just the Holy Spirit. So 7 spirits could contradict, a key doctrine if we're not careful. 7 spirits, I think, was also referred to in the Old Testament, because there were some rabbis who believed God was that there were 7 members of the Godhead, actually. Based on a wrong interpretation of that idea. So you asked earlier, if a misinterpretation caused problems, well, that would be a big problem. So, well, actually, there's 7, there's not 3. All right.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, Shulong, let me give you the next one here. Psalm 17.
Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings. Okay, keep me as like. Okay, this is simile. As the apple of the eye.
There is a comparison here. Keep me as. So how to keep me? Okay, so good. Do you see anything else?
The apple of the hide me in the shadow of it.
So, think of an apple. So keep me as, that would be, we have a simile. But then he has the apple of the eye. what is that? Is he speaking of a literal piece of fruit in the
Yeah,
eye?
is actually some kind of not metaphor, but because keep me as the apple is actually a phrase.
Yeah, the apple of the eye. It's actually
Yeah.
an English expression.
Yeah,
used.
is actually the idiom.
Yes, it's an idiom
Yes.
referring to the pupil.
Mm.
And honestly, this is a very Americanized translation, because honestly, the it's not the apple of the eye. The literal translation here is the little man of the eye.
Okay.
That's the Hebrew term. They refer to the pupil as the little man.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So apple of the
interesting.
eye, actually, and this is a kind of an interesting translation that's a little bit misleading, because it's a more romanticized in the English, the connotation, the apple of the eye, like it's a precious thing.
Mm.
You know, you are the apple of my eye. But honestly, here he's not referring to it in that sense. It's the little man of the eye. It's more the idea of protection, right? Because to poke someone in the eye, that's we defend that very strongly, right? Someone tries to poke our eye or something comes near our eye, we're very and that's the idea here. He's saying the apple of the eye, keep me as the apple of the eye, means protect me.
Oh.
Guard me, like you do, you know, your eyeball, right?
Yeah.
We're very protective of our eye. So it's not a, some people have interpreted this as some emotional express. Oh Lord, you know, give me your tender care. And that's true. God does give tender care, but here the idea is protection.
Oh, this is really, thank you, Pastor Tim. I'm learning, I never realized that apple of the eye in the Hebrews is a little man. I always thought about apple of the eye is like keeping me as your favorite, or watch over me, you know, and how, not realizing that it is more of a protection.
Yeah. And so in English, you know, in our usage, when we use apple of the eye, that the connotation there is kind of more of an emotional care, preciousness. But again, notice too, parallelism helps us here, gives us context, because what's the second line? Hide me. So that's again the idea of protection. Anyway, sorry, Shilong. Do you see any other?
Yep, hide me in the shadow of your wings. Start from your wings. So I think it's zoomorphism.
Yes. Yep. God does not have wings. So that's clearly, but again, the picture here is of protection. So it's providing providing that idea. All right, very good. Very good. Let's see. I think we're back to Tongin. Or Daniel, did you do one yet? I forgot. You done one, Daniel?
Yes,
Okay.
the dogs.
That's right. Tongin, you want to do this Psalm 44?
Okay. I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me. So
This one's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will trust. I think that is metaphor.
What's being compared
or
if it's a metaphor?
trust. Yeah, his trust my bow. There's no his anything, I mean, compared to bow.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a comparison here.
He just said my bow, so maybe like a personification or anthropomorphism.
Yeah, I don't think
Or
there's nothing here being attributed to human characteristics. It's actually a tough one. Notice he says, I will not trust in my bow or my sword. Yeah, I think possibly this one could be a form of synecdoche. Which remember, synecdoche is part of something that represents the whole. Where I think possibly the way David is using this here, bow and sword, as a representing representing all weapons. For example, we were to say the scalpel heals. Well, right, a scalpel is like used in surgery, right? It's not the scalpel that heals, it's the scalpel along with the doctor. So it doesn't say the doctor with the scalpel heals, it just says the scalpel heals. So it's this idea of, a part representing the whole. I think that's how David's using it here. But again, this was a little tougher. I probably shouldn't even use this as an example because it's not for certain, but I think that he's talking about, trusting in representing all weapons or his army. He's not going to trust in any weapon to save him. And if you look at the context of the passage, we can pull up here. You are my king, command victories. Through you, we will push back our adversaries. Through your name, we will trample down. So he's speaking of, right, armed battle. I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me, but you have saved us from our adversaries. So I think it's in the context is I'm not going to trust in my weapons or even my army. Because he mentions like you command victories for Jacob, our adversary. So he's speaking of even the nation here, not just himself. But that was a little tough. Let me give you another chance here, Tangen. I'll do one that's hopefully a little better. You want to try Psalm 10? Are you still there, Tangen?
Okay. His mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppressions, and his tongue is mischief and wickedness. Okay. His mouth is like compared to curses and deceit and oppressions. Is so I think metaphor.
Okay, is something being compared here? He's not
Yeah,
comparing his mouth, but he's saying it's full of curses.
Yeah, full. Yeah, oh yeah, full of curses. Yeah. Full.
What might that be?
Yeah, euphemism or
How about think of the idea of full of,
Mhm.
kind of
Hyper,
exaggerating, right?
hyperbole.
Yeah,
hyperbole.
hyperbole.
Yeah. Yeah. Hyperbole.
And notice here he says mouth, and then later and tongue.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's basically representing the person.
Yeah, I mean, I would first see this as a merism, right? He doesn't just say his mouth
Merism.
or his tongue, he says both. But then
Mhm.
obviously as well, it's not just his mouth or his tongue that's doing this, right?
Mm. Yeah.
The idea of perhaps synecdoche.
Mm. The whole person.
Right? It's not just his mouth that's the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, Jesus later said, out of the mouth the heart speaks. But and then even this idea of mouth full of curses, that's kind of an idiomatic expression.
Mhm.
All right, because there's not not a literal physical object in his mouth, but the curses are being described like,
Mm.
like in his mouth. The picture is his mouth is full, but it's not full of food, it's full of curses. So it refers to evil speech. All right. All right, Dwayne, let me give you another proverb.
Oh boy, I like that one.
I thought you
A
would.
pig would really be cute with a gold ring, and I'm all for that. I like pigs. I think they all have a gold ring in their snout. But of course, to common sense, that don't make any sense at all. It's definitely a hyperbole. You just don't put gold rings in pigs. Shovel. That's a shovel, and and a beautiful woman without discretion. Okay, that's a pretty good comparison there.
Yeah, this is a comparison, isn't it? Like a gold ring. So what
Mm.
kind of comparison is it as we look at the options?
Oh man, what kind of comparison? Well, it's not direct, and I don't know. It's probably this last one, hypocatharisticus.
Oh yeah, the catastasis. Well, notice here the word like is used at the beginning, like a gold ring. It's a beautiful woman. So that normally that's the simile, because it uses the word like or as to make the comparison.
Yeah, that's added, but that, of course, probably
Yeah.
is appropriate.
Well, that's a good observation. So first, it looks like a simile, right? Because it says like a gold ring. So a beautiful woman is like a gold ring, pig snout. But yeah, as you observed, Dwayne, notice that like here is italicized.
Mm.
And what does that mean?
It was applied.
Well,
It
it's
was added.
by the translators.
on.
Yeah.
So like actually was added by the translator here, and I think it should not have been added because it weakened the comparison.
Yeah, you don't have to add it. It's obviously a extreme comparison.
Yeah, exactly. So this really is a metaphor because there is no like. It's literally, so we could just even cancel it out. All right. A gold ring and a pig snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. That's what the verse literally reads.
Well, the is also a simile. Isn't is a simile?
No,
as.
it's a
as.
metaphor. Yeah, as. So this is really a metaphor.
Yeah, the Lord is my shepherd. Yeah, like that.
Yes, that would be metaphor. So what they did, the translators actually weakened the comparison. The Solomon intended it to be a strong comparison. You know, a gold ring and a pig snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. But when they added like, they sort of softened that comparison a little bit. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, Dwayne, you were right in your observation there that actually it is obvious that this is not literal, that it's a comparison being made, but it's a strong comparison that's being made here. So it's not hypocatastasis, because I guess that would have been something like if is wasn't there, you know, gold ring and a pig snout, or a beautiful woman without discretion, a gold ring and a pig snout. You know, that would be probably like the hypocatastasis. But here it's a metaphor that our translators unfortunately softened a little bit. Let me see if that was the case. What the other ones did. So NAS said as a ring. So they made it a simile as well. The Legacy Standard as a ring. So they softened it. ESV like a gold ring. So that's the translation I use. How about the New King James? No, as a ring. So they all added it. Like a ring, NIV. So let me see. Now the Baptist version here did not add it. The CSB, the Christian Standard, notice just says a beautiful woman who. Oh no, sorry, they did. They just put it in later. Okay, I missed that. Notice though the Young's literal translation, a ring of gold in the nose of a sow, fair woman and stubborn of behavior. So they did not put in the like. So they kept it as a. They actually made it a hypocatastasis. They didn't even put is there.
Yeah, and they changed the swine to sow.
Yeah.
So with the female with the female.
Yeah. Yep. So in any case, small detail, but again, this is the kind of thing, if you're exegeting the passage, you want to be as accurate as possible. And that would mean that recognize this is a stronger comparison than the translation. And honestly, guys, I would point that out if I were teaching this passage. Normally, you don't want to pull in exegesis too much, but I think in this case, I would draw attention to this. Notice in the translation, this word is italic, meaning they added it just to make the comparison more obvious. But however, Solomon intended for this to be a strong comparison. He's making a strong statement here that, you know, a woman without discretion is a pig with a ring in its snout. Just doesn't go together. It's not beautiful. It's not attractive.
So a woman without discretion would be kind of like an airhead that we would think about today. She just can't think very clearly, and she's more than silly.
Yeah.
We used to have those around. We used to laugh about them. Just an airhead. Thank heaven I didn't marry an airhead.
That's
just nothing between the ears. It's just amazing that the head don't collapse and kill them.
So that'd be an idiom, right? Basically an airhead, right? Just nothing in the, no brain in there. Okay, let's try to squeeze in a couple more here and finish up. Okay. How about this one? You try, you want to take this one?
Okay. Psalm 10, verse 9. He lies in wait in a hiding place as a lion in his lair. The word as is used, so we have a similar here, that the person who is hunting is like a lion.
Yes, good. It's a simile because he says like or as. He lies in wait as, so it's making comparison how he is lying in wait, like a lion in his lair. Good. Anything else?
Then the next line, it says, in fact, we see the synonymous parallelism. He lies in wait. He lies in wait.
Yes.
Catched the afflicted, in this case, in a hiding place like a lion. And
Yep.
then this is a three-line parallelism. How he does it, he catches the afflicted when he draws him into his net. Again, the net is what is this now? Just a minute. The net.
Yeah, what's the picture here now?
Well, the net is an entrapment,
Yes.
but the net is what is this? This is I'm not sure it's a hypocatesis in that sense.
No, it's not a
like-
comparison, but
Oh, it's not comparison. That's right.
no. So he's not literally having a net either. It's a picture of being right.
Euphemism.
Well, it's not. It wouldn't be an offensive or blunt expression, I think, but you're close. It is a substitution. I would say it's an idiom.
Draws him into his net.
Speaking of capture or entrapment, right? Right. He lured me into his net. Okay, that would be an idiom where he didn't have a literal net but it's the picture, right, of a prey being captured. Okay. So I would call that it's an idiom. Okay, good. All right, one more. I'll do this one. Yahweh, unless Shulong, are you there? Why don't you do this one, Shulong? You can finish up for us. Psalm 18:2.
Okay. Yahweh is my rock and my fortress, and my deliverer is my rock.
So is Yahweh a literal rock?
It's actually like a rock is zoomorphism, right?
Well, here it's rock is not an animal. Notice the word is.
Okay.
Yahweh is my rock.
Is.
Yeah.
Yahweh is my rock is metaphor.
Yes. Because he's saying
My
Yahweh,
fortress.
he's comparing Yahweh to a rock. Okay, and even fortress, that would be also. But then notice deliverer, could that be literal? Yeah. So it's just there's two metaphors here, and really it's describing the third. Now, what about this next line? My God, my rock.
My God, my rock is what is the next one that what we call that? What is the name of the comparison, the strongest one?
Hypocatastasis.
Yeah, hypocatastasis.
Exactly. Because here he doesn't say, my God is my rock. He said that in the first line. Here he just says, my God, and then he calls him directly, my rock. So that's actually the strongest. So he repeats and he increases the strength of the comparison. So he's really emphasizing this, right? He is my protection, and he even says that, in whom I take refuge. And then, of course,
he go on with the series of this hypocatastasis.
Yes, my shield, the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. Those are all the horn, stronghold, shield, those are physical objects. So it's not literal, but the comparison is strong. He's just calling God a shield, a horn, stronghold. Okay. All right. And again, noting that it's the strongest form of comparison indicates how much he's stressing this reality, that God is my protection, my deliverer. And then I had one more here. He sent me from on high. He drew me out of many waters. Well, that's a figurative expression, because it wasn't that David was drowning, it was being rescued. It's an idiom here expressing that refers to being delivered. Again, in keeping with the context of God as a deliverer and the protector. So it's like the picture is of him, he's drowning and God saves him out of the water. And it wasn't literally happening, but it was a expression to describe God as a deliverer. Okay. Now, if we consider like what just came to my mind was Jonah. When he says, I cried, you cast me in the deep, the heart of the seas, the current engulfed me, all about. This isn't figurative. This was literal. He was in the waters. And then he was, the great deep engulfed me. Water encompassed me. So that here he's not being figurative in this sense. He's being literal. David was saying, you delivered me, you drew me out of the waters. There he was being figurative, but here in Jonah 2, it's actually literal expression. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I think that was actually what had happened.
Yep.
So again, context always help us with, even though Jonah was that was a poem there, Jonah described he was describing a literal circumstance. It wasn't figurative at all. Well, there are some figures of speech in there, but when he was talking about being the waters engulfed me, and that was literal. But there are other times where an author or poet may use it in a figurative sense, like David did. He drew me out of the waters. So, okay, well, I think that's enough. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. Figures of speech are not always easy to identify, but it's important to be. You may not be able to note what is the figure of speech, so you may not know. Oh, is this metaphor? Is this anthropomorphism? Synecdoche? I don't know, but I know it's figurative. That's the most important thing. Can you notice if it's figurative or not? Now, if you can identify the figure of speech, that's good. But more importantly is, can you identify if it's figurative or literal? Okay, that's the critical thing. So don't feel bad if you're like, I don't know if is this a merism? Is this metonymy? These are, for many of us, new expressions that may be hard to remember or understand completely. But the key is the identifying figurative language, that it's figurative language. Okay. And from that, we identify it, one, by context, obviously, but then secondly, by that expression and how it could be used in other places in the scripture. That also can help us in determining that. But you just go through each line and just ask, does this seem to be literal in this particular context? And usually, I think you'll be able to know. Like when Dwayne did that Proverbs 11, like right away, he said, no, this is not literal. So that was obvious. Sometimes it's not as obvious what kind of figurative speech it is, but don't feel bad if you can't do that part. That'll come with practice. There's a lot of times I look at it and go, I know this is figurative, but I'm not quite sure how, like which poetic definition it is, but I know it's not literal.
Mm.
No. All right. Any final questions, comments before I let you guys go tonight? I do have, let me show you. And I'll put this in your notes so you'll have it. But I do have a few resources here that talk about figures of speech. So, a few online resources you can look up if you want to do a little more of your own study. And I'll give you that in the notes.
Okay.
All right. So Lord willing, next week we'll move on. And we spent quite a bit of time on this figurative language, so I did want to go through several examples, just hopefully get you more comfortable. Because when you teach in, like I said at the beginning, poetry makes up, I think, about 25 or 30% of the scriptures. So you need to be familiar with how poetry works, parallelism, figures of speech, and then we'll cover a few other poetic devices that are commonly used in the next session, because it's important that you can see these things, because there's so much poetry, not only in the Old Testament, but we've seen several examples in the New where poetic expressions are used. So important to identify. Most prophecy uses poetic language. Obviously, the Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. I mean, it's really quite extensive. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, you Chai?
No, I say yep. Thank you.
Okay, Shulong, I'm going to ask if you could close us in prayer tonight.